Welcome to the GMAT Strategy Podcast. You're here because you believe there's a better way to study for the GMAT, and so do we. We created the GMAT strategy to maximize your results and minimize your effort so you can get to the fun parts about business school and life as quickly as possible. My name is Isaac Puglia, and I've been teaching GMAT classes and tutoring privately for the GMAT for almost a decade, and I've achieved a 99th percentile score on the GMAT and helped thousands of students get into the business schools of their choice. I'm excited to be a part of your MBA journey since we all at TGS think our world can benefit from the best possible business leaders that we can find. If this show is bringing you value, please share it with your friends and family who are studying so that together we can make this process as easy and as painless as it can possibly be. Let's go. Today, let's talk about how to cram for the GMAT. By cramming, I mean studying a lot in a very short amount of time, usually up against a tight deadline. Now is the time of the year when I hear from a lot of folks who want or need to cram for the exam due to the impending deadlines. So for lack of a better expression, 'tis the season to be cramming. I want to be clear that I don't recommend this approach at all. If there's any way that you can delay the process, you're significantly more likely to get great results. But if you are intent on cramming, let's at least teach you how to do it well. There are 3 basic steps to cramming well. Number 1 is create more time. And I promise to explain that in depth. I'm not talking about using magic or anything like that. We're going to actually talk about some practical approaches there. So you create more time first. Second is you prioritize. This is a basic concept that all of you are going to be familiar with, but I'm going to talk about how to do it well in the context of the GMAT. We're going to get very tactical with that. And then number 3 is you want to focus on the main 3 issues that hold people back, which is number 1, timing problems, number 2, missing questions you know how to do already, and then of course number 3, content knowledge. But in that order, that hierarchy is really, really important, and we'll talk about why. So we're going to create more time, we're going to prioritize well, and then we're going to focus on the 3 things that are likely to move your results the fastest. Let's dive a little bit deeper into all of these. So number 1, how do you create more time? Well, the first practical thing that you can do to get more hours, so let's say you can't get more weeks at this point in the year, and right now if you're listening to this in the future, it's December 11th, 2025, and most of the round 2 deadlines, which is when most of the applications are submitted to top MBA programs, those deadlines are in a few weeks basically. So you can't necessarily get more weeks, you can't extend the deadline in all situations. There are some situations where you can, more on that in a second. But what you can do is you can get more hours for studying within those weeks. So that's one way that you can create more time, and so you have more time to cram. So the first thing that I recommend is to have conversations with your key relationships. These are people like roommates, romantic partners, friends, and coworkers. Make a list of the people you interact with a lot and decide what the absolute minimum interaction is in order to maintain the relationship long term. Then let them know what you're doing and explain why you're doing it. That's really, really important. Most people are very understanding when you give them the right context. And then you also want to give them a clear end date where they can expect you to be back online and this sort of relationship dynamic to return to quote unquote normal. So maybe this goes without saying, but letting them know what you're doing and explaining why you're doing it, you want to be as transparent as you possibly can. You might have a different level of possible transparency with your romantic partner around the GMAT and MBA and why you're pursuing that versus with your coworkers. And you're all going to have to make those judgment calls for yourself. But you're all very intelligent, very strategic, very good people in my experience from having talked to tens of thousands of you basically over the years of doing this. And so you're probably going to do a really good job of that. But if you have questions about how to implement any of this stuff, you can find us at the GMAT strategy on current social channels if you want to DM us directly, or you can just email us. We're contact@thegmatstrategy.com. And we'll do our best to help you out. If it's appropriate in these relationship conversations, ask for help and see if you can make a trade if necessary. For example, if you're talking to your roommates, you can ask, can you take on all my tasks at the house for the next 2 weeks? And then I'll take all of your tasks at the house for the following 2 weeks. Or something similar to that, something reasonable. A deal they would probably take, if that makes sense, or a deal that you would at least find fair if the situation was reversed. This is like a generally good practice. But again, all of you are probably very experienced with this type of deal making, and so I leave the details up to you. But of course, there are other methods you can use to decrease the amount of time you have to spend on other things like hiring a housekeeper short term or getting a meal delivery service short term. These are all things you can do to like spend less time at the grocery store, spend less time cooking, spend less time cleaning. And then, of course, there is just the general maintenance of relationships that's often required to keep them good. And that's also what I'm recommending that you figure out a way to recalibrate in the short run. And of course, that's the upside of cramming. No one would cram if it never worked. Even though it's a high risk activity, there's obvious upside, and that's why people still do it to a large extent. So this should get you at least 10 more hours per week, if not more, if you handle it well. So if you have these conversations with every key relationship in your life that has expectations of you between now and when you're going to be done cramming, and you recalibrate those relationships, you should be able to get a lot more time, like significantly more hours. Again, reach out to us if you're not sure how to handle that stuff well. Perhaps obviously we have a lot of experience helping people out with this stuff. Okay, so that's how you get more time. Number two, another way to get more time, quote unquote, and this is where we start to fuzzy the definition a little bit, is to optimize the time that you already have. So just getting more out of the hours that are currently on the calendar. So this is going to be pretty simple. Research shows that there's about a 50% gain in learning efficiency with adequate sleep, diet, and exercise. And I'm using the word adequate in the most literal sense. You don't need to be like a sleep superstar or have a professional athlete diet. If you can do those things, that's awesome. But I'm just talking about adequate sleep, diet, and exercise. And this is a place where I see people really make big mistakes when they're cramming. They're sacrificing sleep, they're sacrificing their gym time, rather than just recalibrating that and minimizing it, and then sacrificing the other areas short term that don't usually enhance learning. Like cleaning your house and cooking food is usually not, and there's no data that I've found that shows that makes you a better learner, but there's quite a bit of data, and you can feel free to look it up on sleep, diet, and exercise. So you want to be cutting the right things, but not cutting too much of the things that actually help you study better and get more out of each study session. Now, that sounds obvious on the surface, but cramming a lot of times is like a very emotional activity. We're kind of feeling the panic. And usually when we're in that state, there's a lot of energy and a lot of like action taking that can happen from that. So that's quite positive. But it can shut down some of the prefrontal cortex in our brain and make the long-term planning and strategizing and like recalibrating stuff harder to do. And that's what I'm trying to help you out with now. If you're kind of in that panic space right now, is you don't want to be cutting too much sleep. You might be able to cut some sleep, but if you're unsure how much is the minimum amount that you need to perform, then get a sleep tracker. That's an easy investment. I've talked about it a lot in the past. If you already have one, then you're probably good to go on that, like a expensive one, like a wearable tech or something. But there's free sleep trackers out there, and a quick web search will net you some good options there. Okay, diet. I'm not going to go too deep on that, but like just what makes you feel your best. Feel free to do that. And then also keep in mind the time trade-off for that. So like, is there a way that you can automate that, or you can make a trade with someone, whether a professional or otherwise, to help you maintain a good diet without having to spend a lot of time cooking and shopping and that kind of thing. And then finally with exercise, again, use some good judgment and common sense here. You're probably not going to be getting in your best shape of your life and hitting the gym 3 hours a day while you're cramming for the GMAT on a short timeline, okay? But that's fine. You're also not going to like go terribly backwards in your fitness goals if you cut it down to the minimum amount of exercise. So what I've seen work well is at least 20 minutes a day, and I would say at the very, very minimum, 3 times a week. That's probably the absolute minimum amount of exercise where you're not hurting your learning. And then you'll have to adjust and calibrate. I've found the sweet spot for most people is about an hour a day, give or take, maybe 45 minutes. It's probably the sweet spot. For good exercise, you can get a good level of intensity going there, whatever you're comfortable with your current physical state. And that tends to work well as far as optimizing the learning process. Usually less than that, you might start to feel the fatigue and your sleep might not be as good. More than that, and you're probably sacrificing study time that you could use, and you're more prioritizing your physical fitness rather than prioritizing your GMAT prep. So that's just a broad general recommendation. There's going to be quite a bit of variety in that from person to person. I already told you how you can get in touch with us if you want help with that, but that's the basic recommendation as far as sleep, diet, and exercise goes. So let's just think about that for a second. If you nail that stuff and you get a 50% gain in learning efficiency with the hours that you do put in, that is the equivalent of getting 50% more hours. That is the exact equivalent, because study hours are not what move your GMAT score. That's really important. Don't get me wrong. You want to maximize the high quality study hours you have. But what moves your GMAT scores is building your skills. So if you can get 50% more skill gains from each hour of studying, that's a huge, huge lever. That's going to make you way more effective at cramming. So again, I just want to emphasize this. You don't want to go big with sleep, diet, and exercise during this period. You just want to get enough of each to feel okay. Again, adequate. Adequate sleep, diet, and exercise is the equivalent of having 50% more study time. That's a big deal. Now, the other thing that you can do here to optimize your study time and maintain a high learning rate per hour is study in 2-hour blocks with at least 1 hour of break in between those blocks. Again, going back to like cramming is this really emotionally intense, emotionally driven situation. You can kind of get into that panic study mode if you're not careful. And what I see happen to a lot of folks is they're like, I'm going to study 6 hours straight, and that's going to be way better than studying in these 2-hour blocks. And look, if you've had success with that in the past and you're seeing good results, then I'm not going to argue with your methods, and definitely keep studying 6 hours straight. But for 99.9% of people who I've ever advised on this, which is a significant number of people at this point, 2-hour blocks with at least a 1 hour break in between is going to take you 100 times farther than trying to get 8 or 10 hours straight. That's just what I've seen. Now, it might seem like you're like decreasing the study time quite a bit by taking those 1 hour breaks, but you can still get really good 10 or 12-hour days hitting this the right way. So for example, just a quick example, if you do a 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. block and then take a break, and then a 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. block, and then take a break, and then a 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. block, and then take a break, and then a 4 to 6 p.m. block, and take a break, and then a 7 to 9 p.m. block. That still gives you quite a bit of time throughout the day to handle other responsibilities, rest, exercise, perform chores around the house if that's needed, get stuff done at the office. I'm not saying you're going to be able to study 10 hours a day if you have to keep working full time while you're cramming, but I'm just illustrating the concept of taking breaks and getting higher leverage hours is going to take you much farther in terms of your skill gains than just trying to overwhelm the situation with lots and lots of consecutive hours of studying with no breaks. And again, there's tons and tons of research to back this up. You can feel free to fact check that as much as you want. Look at the studies, read the abstracts, consult the GPTs, whatever you want. I think you will find that that advice holds up extremely well. Now, after the 10 hours a day with 2-hour study blocks, we get into like what's adequate sleep, diet, exercise for all of you, and that's going to be more like to taste. But we've actually got a full episode on how to study full time where I go a lot more in depth with that advice about how to optimize your time if you're studying for full days, especially a lot of full consecutive days. So if you're going to like take 2 weeks off from work and try to cram for the GMAT and study full time, I think you'll really, really get a lot of value out of that how to study full time episode. But I'm just going to leave it at that to keep this episode a little more high level and a little bit more cram appropriate, let's say. All right, last piece of how to get more time. We talked about having conversation with key relationships. We talked about optimizing the time that you already have. I promised I would tell you how to actually get literally more weeks to do this. This is a high-risk strategy, but you can research whether schools that you want to go to accept updates in your scores after the deadlines. Again, very risky strategy, but it could get you 2 to 6 more weeks of study time if you handle it well. So what you're going to do in this situation, to be clear, is you're going to take the exam before the deadline, probably get a score that's not as good as you could have gotten with another 2 to 6 weeks of studying, but it's at least a score that you can submit, even if it's low or like outside the typical range for the school. And then what you're going to do is you're going to keep studying after you submit the application after the deadline, and then you're going to send the new score as an update after you retake the exam. Again, usually within 2 to 6 weeks of the deadline is like an acceptable time frame to send an update like that. Now, again, very high risk. Not all schools are going to consider it. Some schools say they're open to updates, but they don't guarantee that they're going to make the consideration in the application. So like even if it's submittable and you can give them the score, there is a chance that they're not going to view it. So it's You want to use this approach with extreme caution, okay? Extreme caution. But drastic times can sometimes validate drastic measures. And this is something that I have had success with in the past. Although I would say if I had to put the odds of success on this, it's maybe 50 to 70%. Like it's not amazing. But for some of you, if the difference is needing to wait an entire year and that's just not an option for you for whatever reason, versus just living with your crappy score by the round two deadline or whatever the deadline is. And I'm just using these words to make it an extreme case. Most of your cases won't be that extreme, but let's say it's super extreme, like you're applying with a score that's 200 points outside the median. Well, submitting after the deadline is going to be a lot better than just waiting and sitting on your hands and being like, I hope that 200-point differential doesn't hurt me too much. You know what I mean? So I'm not saying you should do this. And I've already made my disclaimer at the top of the episode. I don't recommend doing any of this stuff if you can help it. It's much better to just delay if possible. But if that's not possible, or you want to just, you're that high risk person and you're okay accepting the downside for the upside, that's what I would recommend doing. So that's how you create more time. Have conversations with your key relationships, optimize the time you have with adequate sleep, diet, and exercise, and then research whether any of the schools that you would like to go to would accept an update after the deadline. That can get you a ton more time, way more additional time than you might have thought that you had to cram. Okay, so once you've made that time, now you want to do a good job prioritizing. So let's talk about how you do that with the GMAT specifically. First things first is handling the emotional side of prioritizing. It can be a challenge to admit to yourself that you're not going to get better at everything that you want to if your time is limited. That for a lot of you is holding back your ideal cramming strategy, is you're trying to get better at everything as fast as possible, and that's holding you back. And there's all kinds of perfectionism, there's all flavors. Sometimes those flavors of perfectionism are super useful and valuable, and sometimes they are extremely self-destructive. So we got to figure out how to calibrate that. That's what I'm trying to help you do here with this piece of advice. So basically accepting that you're not going to get better at everything will also help you accept that it's extremely self-defeating to try to get better at everything in a limited amount of time. Imagine an analogous situation. You're trying to interview at every possible job that could make you more money than you make right now. Imagine that, as insane as that sounds, every possible job that could make you more money, and you're going to interview for all of them. You'd constantly be learning about new industries, building shallow relationships, not doing well with your current role, risking getting fired from your current job. That's kind of a good picture of what spreading yourself too thin looks like. And it's a good analogy for what not to do on a short timeline with the GMAT. Okay, so I'm just helping you with your beliefs here. Just give up the belief that you're going to get better at everything when you're cramming, and that'll give you the energy and the time and the resources to get better at the things that are actually going to move the score on a short timeline. Okay, it's not an ideal situation. We've already talked about that. This is an episode about how to deal with the non-ideal situation as well as you can. So what you're going to do instead of trying to get better at everything is you're going to pick a top 3 things that you believe will move your score the most. And I'll tell you how to figure this out in a second. You're going to pick a top 3, and you're going to focus 80% of your time on those 3 areas only. And then you're going to allocate 20% of your time to maintaining all the other topics that you might have built up over your past studies, or that you're just trying to maintain because you came in at a good spot and you're worried about going backwards. Okay, so 80-20, focus on top 3, and then 20% of your time goes to maintenance of everything else. So for the 20%, just do a simple mix of those questions at moderate difficulty levels. Again, don't be trying to max out your gains on reading comp if reading comp's already a strength for you on a short cramming timeline. That's you not accepting what I was talking about before. That's you trying to get better at everything and having this unrealistic expectation of yourself and the situation. Now, I don't want to put too much heavy language on that. Maybe you're the 1 out of a million people who's going to get better at everything on a short timeline, okay? Maybe that's you. And if that's you, I'm never going to argue with your results. But the lower risk strategy is what I'm telling you to do right now, okay? So we're trying to make some good risk trade-offs. So you're going to do a mix of those non-focus area questions at moderate difficulty levels. For example, let's say you need to improve your DI score, but your quant and verbal scores are currently good. 20% of every day should be doing short sets of quant and verbal questions under timed conditions at a medium difficulty level. You're not trying to get better at those things. You're just trying to not get worse. Okay? But if you let your emotions control you and you start expanding that 20%, that's probably going to hold you back. That's what I've seen over about, let's call it like 100,000 data points at this point. Okay, so that's how you deal with your 20%. Now, I'll probably circle back to this later, but just in case I don't get to this piece in the time that I have today, the quick rundown of that is if you have a paid platform and you're happy with the question quality and the way that you can set up these short sets, I'd recommend 10 question sets, keep them short, and mix all the topics that they allow you to mix in there. So in this situation where you're trying to get better at DI, but your quant and verbal is already good, and you're trying to fulfill on my advice of 20% of your time goes to short sets. By short, I mean 10 questions. Under timed conditions means just multiply the time per question by 10. So in quant, that's 2 minutes and 8 seconds per question average that you'll have on the exam. And for verbal, it's 1 minute and 58 seconds average per question if you do the math on the 45-minute sections. And you do them at a moderate difficulty level. So most platforms are going to have a medium difficulty level setting. That's where you're going to stay, okay? And that's how you're just going to not get worse. Now, if you want to know a little bit of the why behind that, when people are doing hard questions, they're usually getting sucked into spending way too much time reviewing every single question. That's going to make it a lot harder to cap your time at 20%. And when you're doing easy questions, it's not challenging enough to build your skills. So the medium difficulty maintains your basic skill set while making sure that you are maintaining the ability not to miss questions you know how to do. What happens when people over-index on only hard questions in a short amount of time is they develop a bunch of bad habits trying to get those hard questions right, and then that undercuts their score because those bad habits then bleed over into easy and medium questions, and they start missing those easy and medium questions, even though that's the foundation of a good score on a short timeline. Okay, so a lot of this is very counterintuitive. That's why a lot of people cram and then they don't get good results. Okay, so again, reach out to us if you're not sure how to fulfill on that 20% time. Let's talk about what to do with the 80% time you're going to invest in your top 3 areas. So the first step in doing this well is taking a practice exam if you haven't taken one in the past week. Use MBA.com ideally, but if you've exhausted those, any third-party test is going to be roughly the same quality. There's a fairly significant quality drop-off after the MBA.com exams. But pretty much any third-party provider exam you can get access to will be there's actually a big quality gradient there. It's a conversation for another time. But for the purposes of what you're doing with cramming, any of the third-party tests will help you with this because they all have analysis features and you're all intelligent people and you'll be able to figure out what your top 3 is if you fulfill on what I'm about to tell you, okay? So why do you need to take a practice exam if you haven't taken one in the past week? Well, a test that's 2 weeks old might not be representative of your current skill set, especially if you've been cramming for a while. So you need something that's as fresh and as accurate as possible. That's why I recommend the MBA.com exams because those use real GMAT questions and the real scoring algorithm. You're not going to get a better proxy than that. But if you've exhausted those, third-party exam will do. So that's why I'm recommending taking a practice exam. Now, the second step in using your 80% time well is assess the most important score drivers. That's timing, missing questions you know how to do, and content knowledge in that order. What you're going to do is you're going to rank them. Timing is most important because if you know everything but you run out of time before you can get credit for it, your score won't reflect your abilities. And there's a significant penalty for not finishing sections on the GMAT. That's why timing is the most important thing to fix if timing is an issue for you. So let's use an example. If you're struggling with timing and you're struggling with word problems in the quant section, timing's the bigger priority. You might still choose to prioritize word problems over other things, and I'll teach you how to do that in a minute. But time is going to be the priority because no matter how good you get at word problems, if you're running out of time at the end of the section, it's very unlikely that that's going to help your score. Okay, and we don't want you wasting time. Time is of the essence always, but even more so when you're cramming. Now, missing questions you know how to do is the second most important thing for exactly the same reason. If you know everything, but you misread every single question, then your score is going to suffer, and knowing more things, all that study time is not going to move the score. That's all we care about. We don't even care about you knowing more things. We just care about your score going up. It just happens to be that increasing your skills is the most reliable way to make your score go up. Maybe that's just painfully obvious, but worth saying. Okay, then content is third. Let's say your timing is decent. You're missing very few or zero questions you know how to do. Well, now learning more material is actually going to move your score. So that's that breakdown. So you want to take your practice tests. You want to assess, how's my timing? Am I missing more than, let's say, one question I know how to do per section? We're all human. We're probably going to drop one question we know how to do per section almost no matter what we do, but try to get it down to zero if you can. It's hard to be perfect, but it's possible. And then if those things are good, then you work on content knowledge. Now, within content, we want to make sure that you're focused on the right things as well, because some topics show up way, way, way more often than other topics. And a lot of times the topics that show up the least amount take the longest to learn. So you definitely want to avoid that kind of thing when you're cramming. So I'll give an example in a second, but let me just talk through the overall approach here. The big three content areas are word problems in the quant section, algebra in the quant section. That includes exponents, roots, and inequalities, but basically equations and inequalities of all kinds. Typically, exponents questions are part of that. And then fractions and percents. Okay, so those are your big three in the quant: word problems, algebra, fractions, and percents. Now, most people are pretty good at analyzing what's going wrong in verbal. You can fairly easily look at your verbal breakdown and figure out whether you're missing more critical reasoning or more reading comprehension. That part is not usually too tough. But again, if you're unsure, reach out to us. And then within DI, data sufficiency is the biggest priority because you're going to see 5 to 8 data sufficiency questions. And usually you're going to see fewer of the other types of DI questions. So for example, there's about a 50% chance you're going to see 2 multi-source reasoning, and that would then be 6 multi-source reasoning questions. So that's usually the next highest priority after data sufficiency in terms of just stuff that comes up a lot. But because there's a 50% chance you see only 1 multi-source reasoning and then only 3 questions, you might see more 2-part analysis or more graphs. So data sufficiency is a good bet if you're totally lost, but you're probably going to be able to look at your practice test score breakdown and see like, oh my gosh, I'm missing way too many 2-part analysis here, okay? But if you're not sure and it's all even, then focus on data sufficiency. Okay, so that's how you assess the most important content areas. And again, just rank them. If your quant score needs more work than your DI score, and you're not very good at word problems, then word problems should be one of your content focus areas. So let's say you suck at timing, you're missing way too many questions you know how to do, and your quant score is terrible. Okay, well, timing's the top priority. Missing fewer questions you know how to do is the next highest priority, and then word problems is the next highest priority after that. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. Stuff to ignore in the quant section. It's good to ignore counting questions like permutations and combinations, probability questions, and mixtures and weighted averages. Those usually take the longest amount of time to get good at with comparatively little upside. You're probably only going to see 1, maybe 2 of those questions per section, a lot of times per test. Even if they're coming up in the DI section as well, you're not going to see a lot of them. And for most of you, it's going to take a really, really, really long time to get to the level where you want to be with those. So I found those to be kind of like GMAT quicksand for a lot of people. Now, if you're already great at counting and probability, you don't have to worry about that. But if you're having a terrible time in quant and you're like, I'm terrible at everything, then just don't even worry about getting better at counting, probability, and mixtures of weighted averages. Focus all your energy on word problems, algebra, and fractions and percents. Okay, this is like, this stuff just shows up 5 times as much. I mean, it's like, you do the math on it. If you want to look at a couple practice exams, again, fact check everything I say, guys. I think you'll find it holds up well. Last point here, and just kind of just circling back to the previous point about prioritizing in general. Just because I needed to hear this back in the day, I'm not saying you need to hear this. I'm saying I needed to hear it, and I'm trying to help who I used to be the most and help everybody else out at the same time. You don't need to love this or feel good about prioritizing this way. You do not need to love it. As an achiever, you'll probably always want to do everything perfectly. And that's awesome. That's amazing. That's an incredible gift to the world, and you're going to do amazing things for the world as a result of those feelings and those tendencies that you have. But we are not in that situation right now. It's just not the time to deploy that side of yourself. Again, on a short timeline, your job is to do the best you can with an imperfect situation. It's a valuable skill. And in general, as we said, it's one you want to avoid using heavily. Try to be in the perfect situation as much as you possibly can, everybody. Highly recommend being in perfect situations 100% of the time. But given that for most of us, that is unrealistic. When it's necessary, it's really, really valuable to be able to prioritize. And all I'm telling you is I'm giving you permission to feel bad about it. Okay? You don't have to be excited to do this. You just have to do a good job on it. Now, if you are excited to do it, that's awesome. But just want to say it's not required. Okay, so we've talked about how to create more time and we've talked about how to prioritize well. Let's now talk about how to fix timing issues, how to fix missing questions you know how to do, and how to fix content issues on a short amount of time. Now that you know how to get more time and how to prioritize the right thing, let's talk about how to fulfill on your plan well. How to fix timing issues quickly. The main thing that you're going to get the most leverage out of here is you need to train you're going to want to train yourself to stop working on problems if you don't have traction after 1 minute. You've got 1 minute to assess your odds of success on a question. Now, if you struggle with making these 1 minute decisions, then just set a 1 minute timer at the start of every problem for 30 problems in a row. Okay, so you're just going to do a 30 problem set. Doesn't even matter what kind of question you use. You're just practicing the timing thing. You're not even practicing the material. So you can use easy questions, medium questions, hard questions. Doesn't matter. You can use quant, verbal, DI. Use whatever you want, but just set a 1 minute timer. Start working on the problem and practice deciding if you should continue to invest after 1 minute, and do that for 30 problems in a row. Okay, but stop after every problem and make some notes to self as you make these decisions. Okay, what I recommend: set the 1 minute timer, do problem one. At 1 minute, decide whether it's a good idea to invest or not. Stop the timer, write down what your decision was, and then do the rest of the problem as if you had no time limit. And then that'll help you assess whether keeping going on the problem or cutting your loss on the problem was a good decision after 1 minute. Okay, then review the problem, make any notes that you want to make, and then do that exact same thing again 29 more times. Okay, if you do this 1 minute drill 30 times on 30 individual questions, not as a set, stopping and making notes after every problem, then you will get really, really, really good at making that 1 minute decision. Now, if you need more work than that, I leave that up to you. If you want to do it on 100 problems, that's fine. But I've found for most people, 30 is good. All right, so that's the number one way that you can decrease your timing issues quickly, because if you can get really good at dumping a question after a minute that's not going well, that's going to free up an insane amount of time for you to work on the questions that you know how to do well. Give it a shot. Let me know how it goes. The second thing you can do to fix timing issues quickly is use short time sets with a countdown timer. 10 question sets are going to give you a faster feedback loop than 20 or 30 question sets. So avoid long sets when you're trying to fix your timing issues. It feels like every month I'm talking to at least one person who's like, I'm just going to do a 100 question time set, and then the 20 question time set's going to feel easy. And man, it's so appealing logically. I just haven't seen it work. Again, if you're getting great results doing that, that's amazing. But what I've seen happen is you're compounding your bad habits 100 times, and then you're stopping the set, and then you're realizing all the bad things you did, and then you're compounding those bad habits 100 more times before you fix them. And that actually makes the bad habits worse. That's why I don't recommend long time sets if you're trying to increase your ability to manage time. Now, second thing with time sets is mix the topics. Don't be combining time pressure with content study. I see people do this all the time. They're like, oh, well, I need to get better at data sufficiency and I need to get better at timing. So the smart thing to do is do a 45-minute countdown timer of 20 data sufficiency questions. That'll be kind of like a real DI section. And that is completely wrong. Again, I know that's super appealing logically. I did all of this stuff wrong, everybody. I did all of this so wrong, and it cost me months and months and months of my life that I'm never getting back. I really don't want that to be you. I promise. I'm not trying to be mean here. I'm trying to be helpful. So mix the topics. Don't be doing 20 question data sufficiency sets. Don't be doing 100 question data sufficiency sets. That's totally going to work against you if you're cramming. Don't do it. Okay? If you're working on timing, only be working on timing. That is the singular focus of the set. And you're going to want to have a mix of topics that roughly mimics what you're going to see on the real exam. So have a couple, if you're doing quant, have a couple word problems in there, have a couple percents questions, have a couple algebra questions. Maybe you throw in one probability question. You throw in a scheduling question, such as there's a bunch of managers and they got to figure out who's working on Wednesday, who's working on Thursday, and there's some kind of overlap. You throw one of those randos in there. And a good way to do this is just randomize it on whatever platform you're using. If you're using a free platform, there's plenty of ways to randomize your content. And if you are on a paid platform, same thing. They'll usually allow you to pick a mix of topics. So mix your topics if you're working on timing. Don't be trying to work on timing and content study within the same set. That's going to super, super, super duper work against you. Why does that work against you? There's 1,000 things I could go on here. This would be like the War and Peace of podcasts. It would be like a 75 million hour podcast. But the kind of short version of that is that it's totally unrealistic to see 20 data sufficiency questions in a row. So how are you going to be making realistic timing decisions? It's going to prepare you and help you optimize for the wrong thing. Just think about that for a second. You are now on a short timeline trying to optimize for something that you are never going to see. Just think about it that way, okay? And that will help. That'll help you make more rational, reasonable decisions about how to practice timing. But again, I'm being heavy-handed with my recommendations because I see people do it all the time. And these are really intelligent, really well-meaning, really hardworking people who would be and are going to be incredible business leaders when they get to that stage of their career, or they're already incredible business leaders and they're trying to level up. And then they're just totally shooting themselves in the foot with bad GMAT prep. Okay. And that's why we're here in the first place. That's why we started this whole thing. Okay. So that's how you fix your timing issues quickly. You train yourself on the 1-minute decision. And then you make sure that you're doing short 10-question maximum time sets with a countdown timer and that you're mixing your topics. Okay, if you do that well, your timing is going to improve extremely quickly. Let's talk about how to stop missing questions you know how to do quickly. First, every time you miss a question you know how to do, create a new behavior that will prevent that mistake in the future. Write it on a note card and have that note card on your desk until you cannot not do the new behavior. You would have to invest energy in not doing the new behavior. That's how long you keep that card on your desk. And once that happens, then you can repeat that with the next new behavior that's going to stop you from missing questions you know how to do. But until you have truly internalized on a physical level doing the new behavior that's going to keep you from missing questions you know how to do, stay focused only on that one new behavior. Okay, so if you're trying to get better at double checking your math in the quant section, you need to have a note card on your desk. Sorry, not need. You're going to want to have a note card on your desk 100% of the time when you're studying that says double check every step of my math. And you're going to want to leave that out on the desk until you would have to try to not double check. All right, that's the length that you need to go to erase those old bad habits. If you've heard the phrase old habits die hard, that is a cliche for a reason. It is absolutely true. Your old habits are going to come back to bite you so fast unless you just bury them with the new habit. Okay? Again, reach out to us if you have questions or if you're struggling with this. All right, so that's how you fix timing issues quickly, and that's how you stop missing questions you know how to do quickly. Let's talk about how to get better at content quickly. This is very budget dependent, and there is a big quality gradient in the quality of content instruction that's out there. So if you can invest more, you're likely to get better results. And I'm sorry to bring up the money thing. I know it's a sensitive topic, but it's absolutely real and legitimate here. And if we don't talk about it, I'm doing you a disservice. Okay. So I'd rather be a little uncomfortable and talk about money than just, have you fail. Now, quick caveat to that is investing more money does not necessarily guarantee that you will get better results. It just increases the odds that you're going to get better content instruction. So invest what you can, decide what you can invest and what you're comfortable investing to maximize your odds, and then just execute well. The thing that's going to make the biggest difference in your success is your own personal execution. That's why the bulk of this episode is about that. The investment piece is important and valuable, but not necessarily a deal breaker. Having said that, like I said before, it's super real. So let's talk about it. If you got to go free with content, I recommend YouTube. YouTube is usually the fastest way to learn content if you're cramming and you have no money to invest. If you don't know how to use YouTube, feel free to reach out to us anytime. It's just a joke within the company that I say that a lot on the pod. So just thought I'd throw one in there for the homies. If you learn best from books and you have the budget where you can buy books, I recommend the Manhattan books. You'll probably get faster content gains from some paid books than you will from YouTube. Having said that, not necessarily true. Okay, but by and large, if you look at a large data set, that's how I've seen it shake out. If you need a video course, then the least expensive and the shortest is Magoosh. So if you're cramming and you're on a tight budget, but you want a paid video course, not YouTube, Magoosh is a good bet for that. Now, if you want live instruction, which is typically going to involve a budget over $1,000 US in most cases, then you're definitely going to want to opt for one-on-one instruction, even if it's more expensive. Try to avoid accelerated group courses like boot camps. What boot camps do is they just cover everything super fast. And I have not had good experiences with that with people on tight timelines. The boot camp thing is great if you're going to take 2 weeks off from work and then you have like 3 months to the deadline to internalize all that content and work on it on your own and maybe get some extra supplementary instruction. I have not had good experiences with boot camps on very, very short timelines. Having said that, it is your decision. That's my advice. If you don't take my advice, perhaps obviously I take zero responsibility for your results. Okay, one-on-one is fully customized and much better for speed. And that comes back to the prioritization thing. Don't be trying to get better at everything if you only have 20 more hours to study between now and test day and you need to cram in those 20 hours. Okay, even if you have 100 hours, you're going to get 20 times more skill gains on average. I'm not saying I know you personally, okay, but I'm just giving you the best general advice I can from one-on-one instruction. That's my advice. Okay, so that's how you get better at content fast. Let me give you some additional advice for that, no matter which format you choose. Number one, work through the material only on the big 3 items in quant: word problems, algebra, and percents or fractions. If you're already amazing at those, you can make the other topics the priority. Or if you've done a good analysis and you've identified that other topics are showing up more on your personal exams and you're worse at those, then I trust your judgment to pick a top 3 there. But in quant, that's the place where I see people struggle to pick the top 3 because they pick the section that they feel worst about. I always feel bad when I see a probability question and then they're spending 20 hours on probability and their score doesn't move or it goes down. You don't want that, okay? Work on the big 3 if you're unsure. That's my first tip. Second tip, work through 30 problems straight on the most important content topic. Okay, so let's say you're going to pick word problems. You're going to do 30 word problems. The way you're going to do it is you're going to do 10 easy word problems, you're going to do 10 medium problems, and then you're going to do 10 hard problems. And you're going to review after each individual question. You are not going to do it as a set. Remember, no time sets on specific topics. That is going to super duper work against you. You're either working on timing and mixing the topics, or you are working on a topic and you are only focusing on the timing on a per question basis, okay? No sets of 30 word problems in a row. Many platforms can provide this kind of difficulty and topic filtering. It's great if you have a paid service. Most paid services are going to have that kind of filtering. But if you need free practice questions, there's quite a few just a web search away, okay? And there's many, many free resources for getting questions out there. Many of them have that filtering capability where you can filter for easy, medium, and hard, and then word problems. Tip number 3, if you're not getting 80% or better at one of the difficulty levels, meaning you're not getting 80% or better on easy questions, or you're not getting 80% or better on medium questions, pick the lowest difficulty level and do 30 more problems at that level. So for example, if you're getting 70% accuracy on easy level rates questions, do 30 more easy level rates questions. That's how you deep dive efficiently. What most people do is they're like, well, I'm just going to do all the hard questions when I'm cramming because that's where I'm going to get the most value. That's not true. We've already talked about that. What a lot of people are not thinking about is all the bad habits that you develop by trying to tweak your process only for hard problems. Well, you're not going to see only hard problems on test day. It's an adaptive exam. You're going to see some easies, you're going to see some mediums, and you're going to see a lot of medium hard. That's where you're going to spend most of your time. Not the super hards, probably won't see any of those if you're like most people. Not the super easies, probably won't see a lot of those. You're going to be mostly in that medium to medium hard difficulty range. If you're not sure how the scoring algorithm works, head to our website, thegmatstrategy.com. It's linked in the description here. We got a free video helping you understand the scoring algorithm better. It doesn't translate well to the podcast. Okay, so I'm getting quite technical here, quite tactical. Let me repeat some of this stuff just so it lands. What you're doing with content is you're working through material from your content provider, okay? So I told you what to do with free, what to do with small budgets, what to do with large budgets. You're going to go to your content provider, and if you're not sure what to work on, you're going to work on the big three in quant. You should be able to figure out what you're not good at in verbal and DI. We already talked about that. What you're going to do is you're going to pick one of those topics and you're going to work through 30 problems on the most important one, the one that you personally think is most important. You're going to go 10 easy, 10 medium, and 10 hard. You're going to review after every single question. You're not going to do it as a set. If you're not getting 80% or better at any level, you're going to pick that level and that topic and do 30 more at that level. You're going to try to bring your accuracy up to 80%. Usually about 80% is when you're good to move on to the next topic or the next difficulty level. That's what I've found. Again, let go of the negative perfectionism. This isn't a situation where you're going to get 100% on everything. If you've got 12 months, you could probably get 100% on everything, or at least close. But if you got 12 days, 80% is more than good enough. After 60 problems on a topic, it's probably time to retest by taking another practice exam and evaluate whether you need more work on timing, whether you need more work on missing questions you know how to do, or whether you need more than 60 repetitions on any particular content area. Okay? So about 60 to 100 is where I've found that. 60 if you're on a tight timeline. If you have a little more time, you can go up to 100 problems on a topic. But after 100 problems, you need to retest and see, like, is this even moving my score at all? Because if it's not, you're going to want to change something. And if you're self-studying, it can be hard to have the objective opinion of what you're doing wrong. So you're going to need that data feedback loop. You don't want to be doing 300 problems on rates before you test yourself again. Now, I want to be really clear about this. This is not general advice. This is only if you're cramming. If you have a more comfortable timeline, a lot of this is the wrong thing to do. Okay, that's why I'm making this episode for you right now. This is only if you're cramming. Okay, so don't be going to your instructor or your coach or something like that and being like, hey, I want to do 100 problems on this topic, even though I have 6 months. Like that's going to go over like a lead balloon. Don't do that. Okay, so that's when you know you're ready to take another practice exam. You've meaningfully improved your timing if needed. You have begun missing fewer questions you know how to do if that's an issue. And you've done 60 to 100 problems on at least one topic of content study, if that was something that was holding you back. If you know all the content and it's only timing, then just improve your timing and take another practice exam. Okay, but all of you are intelligent enough to make those kinds of judgment calls, and you can get in touch with us anytime if you want free help. We're at the GMAT Strategy. You can DM us on current social channels. You can email us. We are contact@thegmatstrategy.com. And believe it or not, we like helping people. So just to recap, you're going to repeat the timing, the new but missed, and the content assessment after another practice exam. You're going to pick the top 3 most important areas. Timing is most important, then missing questions you know how to do, then word problems, algebra, percent, fractions, and quant, reading, comp, or critical reasoning, depending on what you're missing more of in verbal, and then data sufficiency and DI, if you're unsure. But if you're missing all 2 parts, that should be obvious. And you're going to go in that order of priority, okay? Timing's the most important. Missing questions you know how to do is the second most important. Any content study is less important than those 2 things, okay? And then within content, we already talked about what you can work on and what not to work on. Basically, what you're going to do is you're going to go through that cycle as many times as you can before the deadline. That's it, all right? Again, reach out to us if you have questions. What you're going to do the night before your exam is you're going to take 3 hours, at least 3 hours off of studying and get some restful downtime. And you're going to schedule something fun that you like to do that you think is going to make you feel good when you wake up the next morning to take the exam. Okay, that's going to be different for everybody, but at least 3 hours of restful downtime the day before your exam. Don't cram all night the night before your exam or the morning of. That's going to be super, super counterproductive. Make sure you have a solid break before the real test. Otherwise, you risk having adequate knowledge and skills, but inadequate energy. That's going to be a terrible, terrible situation where you theoretically could have gotten the score if you worked less hard. Think about that. And then you're just blowing it by letting your perfectionism run all over everything and destroying your whole performance. Okay, so that's the place where you got to control the perfectionism. You can't let it control you. Every once in a while, it's going to get the best of you. That's called being a human being. You just got to recognize that, step back from it, and get professional help if you need it. Okay, if you're in that kind of severe situation with your perfectionism, you probably already have professional help, but I am not a professional in that regard. None of this is medical or psychiatric advice. This is me telling you to get professional help if you need it. Okay. Most of you won't. Most of you won't. Your perfectionism not that big of a deal. You'll be able to control it. You just need someone to remind you to control it. That was me back in the day. Okay. Okay. So once again, avoid the temptation to cram all night the night before your exam or the morning of your exam. Don't do that. That's going to work against you. Take at least 3 hours off the night before. You don't have to take the whole day off the day before the exam. You don't have to take the whole week off the week before the exam. None of that, especially if you're cramming. 3 hours is going to be more than enough for your body to process all the stress hormones and get you the best sleep that you're capable of in a stressful situation. Okay. You don't need perfect sleep before the exam. You just need the best you can get. And then the morning of, it's okay to study a little bit. You can do some light review, especially if you have a test time in the afternoon or the evening, which is common when you're cramming on short timelines. You couldn't get the 10 a.m. test time, which was the best for you or whatever. So now you're taking the 5 p.m. test time. That was me back in the day. I took my first official GMAT at 4 p.m. It's a little weird, but hey, got the win. um, it's just so crazy to think about how wrong I did all this stuff, everybody. It's just, yeah, thankfully we've come a long way over here. But what's good day of studying? Usually cutting things off like 3 hours before the exam is good. If you have a morning test time, like 8 a.m., you can do a little bit of review, maybe 30 minutes is what I've seen work best. Just kind of like getting warmed up and not having the first question of the exam be the first question you see in the day usually works well. And then just getting to the test center on time and not worrying about it. So even if your like last practice problem is an hour or 90 minutes before the real exam, like that's fine. In my experience, it's still valuable. If you're taking the exam later in the day, then you can still study in the morning, but study in those 2 hour blocks, take a 1 hour break in between, and then take at least 3 hours off before you head to the test center. And that usually works well. Quick tip for test day itself when you've been cramming. Don't focus on what you didn't do or how you don't feel how you want to feel. That is probably going to happen. You're probably going to see a probability question and be like, man, listen to Isaac. He told me not to study this. Now I'm mad. Now I feel bad about myself. Okay. That is probably going to happen if you have these perfectionist tendencies like a lot of us do in this situation. But that's not going to help your performance. Being upset about what you didn't have time for or how you had those difficult personal issues that pushed back your study time and now you have to cram, or how your job project flared up and you told them you were going to go on leave and they forced you to stay, and they whatever, all the kind of stuff that can happen in these kinds of situations that lead us to the situation where we're cramming in the first place. I'm very sympathetic to that. Okay, a lot of my clients every single year go through those kinds of situations, and we find ways to get wins. That's what we're trying to do here, is focus on the things that are going to improve your performance. And remember, you have permission to feel bad about all of this. You can feel terrible the whole time. As long as you get a good score, you're going to be stoked. Okay, so let's focus on that. What I recommend as the ideal mindset for test day when you've been cramming is treat it like your job. Whether you're feeling good or feeling bad, or you slept well or you didn't sleep well, you show up at your job and you execute to the best of your abilities for that particular day. And then you try to come back better the next day, ideally. That's how you're going to treat this. Just like, look, I did everything I could. I'm not feeling the way that I want to feel. Let me just focus on the things that I know are going to improve my performance, get this thing done, just like I would a difficult work day if I'm tired, and then I'll reassess later. Okay, but right now I just got to show up, do work, and take care of biz. All my other problems and all my other thoughts are going to be there when the test is over. Right now it's time to focus. Okay, that's the ideal mindset that I've seen work best for people who've crammed. Couple final notes. Quick note on planning. There's a 16-day waiting period between exams, and it can be hard to schedule in-person appointments for the exam during busy times of the year, like you're probably in if you're cramming. So consider the online exam. If you're not able to find a good date or time to take the in-person test, I generally recommend taking the test in person. There's a way smaller likelihood of a tech issue that messes up your performance or the experience. But if you got to take the test 2 weeks from now, and then you got to submit your applications 3 weeks from now, and there are literally no physical test centers open and available in that time period, then just take the test online. Usually it's much easier to schedule online, and we've got episodes about how to handle the online exam well, what test day is like for the online versus in-person exam. That's all searchable. And there's also plenty of information online that you can get about how to have a good test day, whether you're taking in person or online. Last but not least, one final reminder, just let us know if you have questions or if there's anything we can do to support your individual situation. It may not be an ideal situation, but it is doable if you handle it well and you take the advice that I just gave you. Remember that even a 20% odds of success is better than 0%. And the only way you have 0% odds of success is if you do not try. That's the note that I would like to finish on, okay? So probably can't get you 100% odds of success even with following all the advice that I gave you. But we've probably boosted your odds of success if you are cramming quite a bit. And the only way you're going to know if you can hit it is to give it your all. As always, my greatest hope is that this material is going to make your studies as easy and as painless as they can possibly be. We'll be back soon with more tips, more strategies, more official problem walkthroughs to help you accelerate your progress on the exam and make your dreams come true faster. In the meantime, if you want more tips and strategies for optimizing your performance on the exam, please head to our website, thegmatstrategy.com. Check out our free video on how to reach your dream GMAT score in half the normal time. And in the meantime, this is a regular show, so please subscribe and please stay positive and stay consistent with your studies. Talk to you all soon. Happy cramming, everybody.